Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Please join me in welcoming Danielle Foster, Executive Director of CADA, to the stage. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Hey, Ed Emerson and the Steinberg team really know how to throw a party, right? It's gone on for multiple days, a whole week. And for those of you who've been following along and going to all the State of the City addresses, have your punch cards ready, because at the end we're going to have a raffle, and the winners of the raffle get to hear the extended version of the mayor's speeches. VIP seating. It will include additional content and all the edited dad jokes that we didn't get to hear in the previous speeches. But panelists are not included, sorry. In all seriousness, it's wonderful to welcome you all here today on behalf of CADA and our development partners on this project, CFY. I want to acknowledge Cyrus Yosefi and Ozzy Yosefi, who are both here today, as well as CADA board members and staff. Woo! Yes, we've done this project at CADA both as our nonprofit, our Capital Area Development Community Development Corporation, and we provided direct financing to the project. We think that it's fitting that this conversation be the first event at this site. Bearing his initials for its name, ARY Place was the final affordable housing project that Ali Yosefi thoughtfully designed for Sacramento. Finding ways to further affordable housing, connect it to transit, and build community around it honors Ali's memory and commemorates the purpose of this 158-unit affordable housing development. It will soon be home to hundreds of Sacramentans who might otherwise be facing substandard housing conditions, long commutes, doubling and tripling up, housing insecurity, and even homelessness. But rather than focus on the challenges before us, today we get to hear from our mayor on plans for combating the lack of affordable housing and ways to further integrate transit and address transportation needs in our communities. What an honor to introduce the mayor for this important conversation. He's a leader who comes at these conversations with tenacity and creativity. He's always willing to listen and partner with anyone who has a good idea on how to get housing done. But most of all, he comes with a heart to serve. The mayor has always been a housing champion and a climate champion. He's worked hard at both the state and local level to further objectives in both. He authored Senate Bill 375, which further linked transportation funding to infill housing near transit. Yeah, it's great. In Sacramento, that means more of our housing is being developed on major corridors within our blueprint plan. He successfully negotiated with Governor Brown to set aside 20% of the cap and trade funds to go directly towards affordable housing that was built on corridors. Yeah. And that Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities program has already provided over $63 million directly to Sacramento projects. Yeah, and more is on the way. We are applying more. So the other piece of what he did at the state level that is a major contribution, as the architect of No Place Like Home, he was the author of the 2018 statewide bond that was approved by the voters to set aside $2 billion out of the Mental Health Services Act fund to provide permanent supportive housing, to ensure that we were linking services to the housing that would provide the stability and the support for people to be successful. On the local level, he's also worked hard to provide resources, ensuring that 41 million of the federal COVID relief funds went directly towards affordable housing to further the safety and stability of our community in a post-COVID time. He's also championed housing policies to remove barriers to entitlement process and working to eliminate fees for affordable housing projects through our $0 impact fee program. All of this culminating in the city of Sacramento becoming the first pro-housing designated community in the state of California. I've been happy and honored to work alongside the mayor on creative approaches to getting more housing built during my tenure at the city of Sacramento. Efforts like using city reserve funds for short-term loans to build mixed-income housing projects, utilizing public-private nonprofit partnerships to efficiently bring housing online with the services and public resources it needed, and looking always at new opportunities for ways to build housing more cost efficiently and faster. Manufactured housing, panelized, always looking at quality and responding to the needs of the community. And now in my current role as the director at CADA, I'm grateful to have a continued ally as we work to further the vitality of our downtown capital area, offering a range of housing options, affordability, and community development through events, art, and thoughtful transportation planning in a post-COVID era. I'm excited to hear his vision for this work, and I'm honored to introduce our mayor for the city of Sacramento, Mayor Darrell Steinberg.
Wow, thank you, Danielle, for that very, very warm introduction. More importantly, thank you for the leadership you showed at the city and are continuing to show at CADA to make sure that more housing, more affordable housing becomes a reality. We're really proud of you. We were sad to lose you at the city, but we really didn't lose you because you're still right here and involved in everything. And even though I wish I could give a separate speech about the future of CADA, but I will just give a little tease and tagline about what I think about this agency. It is so important and so impressive in terms of what it has done within its relatively limited geographical boundaries. I would ask our legislators who are here today to at least consider the possibility of going back next year and expand their boundaries so that they can do even more work throughout our central city. I'm really grateful that CADA is hosting this. And of course, this is ARY's place. Ali R. Yousefi. And I would like to dedicate today's talk to the memory of Ali, Cyrus, and Ozzy. Thank you for being here. And also to the memory of Patrick Sablehouse, who passed away last week. His service was yesterday. And this man was an affordable housing champion, not just for our city, not just for the state, but for the entire country. In their memory today, may we do good work together. I want to thank the elected officials. You're all special guests, and I would like to introduce all of you by name. But you will excuse me if I run down a list here and say thank you to the mayor of Elk Grove, Bobby Singh Allen, who is going to be on our panel. And believe me, her presence here is very meaningful, as I think you will see and hear in a few moments. Our senator, who's come to all three of these despite her busy schedule, and I can't tell you how grateful I am for that, Senator Angelique Ashby. And her son, Oregon Duck, Tyus. There he is. Are they in the Pac-10, by the way? Or what? I don't know what the, okay, I don't know what they are. Okay, oh boy, I knew I'd get in trouble. The new president of Sacramento State University, Luke Wood, who will also be on our panel. I'm just going down the list here. Former council member who is my dear friend for life, Jay Chenier. There you go. Former Assemblyman Denny Mangers is here, always gets that honorific and title for that, and so much more. My current colleagues who are my partners. We're a family, a fighting family sometimes, but in the end, let me tell you, They're great people, and we do good work together. So please welcome back from a wonderful sojourn across the world, Councilmember Rick Jennings. Thank you. And his wife, Cassandra, of course, a community leader in her own right. Councilmember Katie Maple, thank you so much, District 5. Councilmember Karina Talamantes, District 3, thank you so much. Councilmember Katie Valenzuela, in whose district we sit. Vice Mayor Eric Guetta, thank you so much, Eric, for being here. Former City Council member Steve Cohn, who is here. Thank you, Steve, who will also be on our panel. Did I introduce Council Member District 1, Lisa Kaplan? Thank you, a great colleague. Fabrizio Sasso, the head of the Sacramento Central Labor Council. Thank you so much, Fabrizio. Former Assembly Member Roger Dickinson is here. Thank you. Henry Lee, who leads Sacramento Regional Transit. Alberto Ayala, who leads our Air Quality Management District. And then our city charter officers. Jorge Oseguera, our city auditor. Thank you for being here. John Colville, our city treasurer. Susanna Alcala, our city attorney. Thank you for being here. Lachelle Dozier, our executive director of the Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency. And let's just say, when we talk about affordable housing, let's talk about Marisol Village. Thank you for being here. From the SMUD board, Rosanna Herber and Greg Fishman. Thank you both so much for being here. And oh my God, I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out here, but I'm doing the very best that I can. So thank you all for being here. Let me open up my little folder here. There are some who I didn't introduce who are going to be members of the panel, and I will introduce them in a few moments. So, honored guests, this is in fact my third and final State of the City Forum for 2023. Applause, applause. Oh my God, how many more of these things is the guy gonna do? Well, this is the last one. And at this final gathering for the State of the City, I want to ask all of you to think about Sacramento's place in this state and in this nation. We are the capital city of the most important and dynamic state in the Union. The state where we are never afraid to innovate and we are never afraid to lead. As the capital city, the capital region, we should be able to always take bold steps when it comes to meeting our biggest challenges. So today, I choose to elevate a set of these challenges that are front and center for the state and the nation, but don't get nearly the attention or the resources they deserve in our region, our county, and our city. And these challenges are literally life and death. I am talking about climate. I am talking about clean, affordable transportation. And I'm talking about the desperate need for more housing, especially affordable housing. Here is what we experience in our city and much of our county as we strive to add the 72,000 housing units that we need by 2029. Stockton Boulevard, represented by several of my colleagues, is a key transit corridor, a city target for revitalization. It is the center of Aggie Square. We need to be able to build more affordable and workforce housing, not only on Stockton Boulevard, but in all of our corridors throughout the city and county, if we're going to meet that housing obligation, and if we are going to meet our climate and our transit goals. Last year, we had an opportunity come along on Stockton Boulevard with a good developer who wanted to build 230 units of housing, 92 of them affordable. The developer, and Danielle alluded to this a moment ago, had a financing gap and needed some city assistance. That's the way, as Lachelle and Danielle know, that's the way most of these projects work. We had to get creative. And I'm proud of the fact that we found money by structuring a $15 million 10-year loan from the city's risk management fund at a higher return, actually, than we would have made with our usual way of investing the risk management fund, Mr. City Treasurer, into the money market. It was Main Street over Wall Street, and it was cool. And I want to thank Danielle again and Jay Chenier, I think, who actually came up with it, for your creativity together in finding ways to get things done. And so while I was happy and proud that we found an answer to that particular project, it should not have been that hard. The Risk Management Fund in the city of Sacramento insures, Madam City Attorney, insures the city against lawsuits. That's its purpose. It's not for affordable housing. It shouldn't be that hard, and we shouldn't have to resort to that kind of creativity in order to finance and fund what we need. We are starved for local funding to build more housing units. Stockton Boulevard is just one example. All over our city and county, we have similar opportunities that go unfulfilled for lack of local funding. And when it comes to our roads, we know perfectly well that many of them are dangerous and discouraging for both pedestrians and cyclists. Marysville Boulevard is known as one of the deadliest corridors in the city. It needs $20 million worth of work to narrow the traffic lanes, install separated bike lines, and pedestrian crossings. Projects like this help our climate efforts by encouraging people to get out of their cars and bike or walk to their destinations. Bike and pedestrian funding should not be some luxury. It is a necessity, especially for a city and a county that is bound by 2 river parkways, and a city and a county that loves the outdoors. There is no sustained local funding to make projects like this happen. So what do we do with our great city and county teams, some of them who are here today in the audience? What do we do to try to make up for that local funding? We fill out grant applications. That's what we do. It's not what a great city or a great county should have to do. When it comes to transit, leaders have talked for decades about installing bus rapid transit lanes on major arterials. It's one of the most cost-effective ways to attract more riders, improve our air quality, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But Henry Lee and the boards working so hard have not had the money to make that happen. And so the challenge is before us. What are we going to do as a county and a city to come up with the local match money we need to pull down more state and federal dollars and partner with the private sector, with the nonprofit sector to build a greener, safer region where everyone can afford a place to live? I think back over the transportation measures in recent election cycles, and I can't help but think of Einstein's definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over and yet expecting a different result. The formula for the past decade has been well worn. And despite the criticism, I'm going to say in many respects well-intended by many elected officials and community leaders, because it's taken a lot for leaders from throughout the county, different jurisdictions, different politics, different priorities, to sit down together and try and craft a measure that could potentially pass muster with the voters, not just of the city of Sacramento, but the entire county. And yet, it has failed, both at the 2/3 threshold and even when a majority vote was possible to pass such a measure. Each past measure put a big emphasis on new roads. That was the motivator and the lead for the campaign and its funding. Trailing the roadway expansion was some money to fix roads, and less than half was set aside for transit and for safer streets. No climate focus, no connection to the blueprint, which was adopted unanimously by the region, unanimously by the entire region, on a bipartisan basis. It's not some one-party thing. To ensure that Sacramento meets our targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, as required under SB 375, drafted by some forgotten state legislator way back in 2007. It is time for a different approach. It is time to set a new direction. This morning, I proposed that the city and the county, through the Sacramento Transportation Authority, place onto the 2024 ballot a fundamentally different measure than what we have seen before. Rather than billions on new roads, which harm the climate, especially without full mitigation, I propose a half-cent sales tax that will raise $8 to $9 billion over 4 years and invest billions directly into an unprecedented county-wide housing trust fund, public transportation, and safer streets. Call it the Climate, Clean Transportation, and Affordable Housing Act of 2024. Let's start with housing. I propose that this measure set aside up to $3 billion, as I said, for a countywide trust fund. Up to 3/4 of that $3 billion should go to new housing, including permanent supportive housing, efficiency housing, including modular construction. We can do more, as I've said for years, by building more modular, less expensive, and faster to build. Affordable home ownership opportunities, low and very low income housing, student and workforce housing, and mixed income projects. We can build tens of thousands of new units by actually having some skin in the game and partnering with the private sector and the nonprofit housing developers. Up to 1/4 should go to keep people stably housed. For we know that for every homeless person we get off the street, 3 more become homeless. Prevention is a big part of the cure here. And it's similar to what we're doing to prevent displacement at and around Aggie Square. Housing rehabilitation and repair assistance, emergency rent payments, mortgage assistance, home ownership support, and counseling. Let's keep people housed so that our problems do not grow worse. The second category in the 2024 measure should be up to $3 billion for public transit, public transportation, and innovative transportation. Think about what we can do if we gave Henry and this innovative agency the resources to do more. We could expand multiple bus rapid transit corridors with dedicated bus lanes that preempt traffic signals. We could expand service and frequency on existing transit lines. We could increase service by 90% on existing lines, 60% growth in service overall, including increasing service on the Gold Line to Folsom. We could replace the old fleets, and we could actually build express bus service not only within our county, but among the counties of the 5-county region. And then I say, set aside up to $3 billion for safe streets and active transportation, protected bike lanes, walkable streets with sidewalks. Implement Vision Zero, which, by the way, if you don't know what Vision Zero is, it is an absolutely essential plan to improve pedestrian and bikeway safety to save lives. And we need to implement Vision Zero so that we don't see or witness or experience these unnecessary tragedies where pedestrians, people are killed on our city or county streets. 249 miles of new paved trails in every city and the unincorporated county for bicyclists and pedestrians, car sharing, microtransit, and last but not least, repairs, real repairs to worn down roads. And let's make sure that with all of this, including the road repair, that we have an equity lens so that those neighborhoods that have gone far too long with dilapidated roads get the resources, the investment, and the help that they need. Thank you. Every investment under this new proposed measure, or any measure, added together, must meet and preferably exceed the 19% GHG reduction, greenhouse gas reduction, that the region has, again, on a bipartisan basis, fully embraced. We cannot, and we will not have a city and county not living up to its responsibility to the region, to the state, to the country, and to our planet. There will be skeptics representing an old way of thinking. They will say, what does housing have to do with transit? They will say, how can the transportation agency put a housing and transportation measure on the ballot? They will say, this will never pass. Let me respond to these anticipated arguments. It is time to shake off the old way of thinking and look at new possibilities. Housing is not only our most urgent need, having infill housing on commercial corridors is in fact the main ingredient for making transit work. We will never achieve the maximum impact of our transit investments unless transit is near where people actually live in numbers large enough to support it. Does STA have the authority to put a housing and transit measure on the ballot? STA, the Sacramento Transportation Authority? I think they do, as housing and transportation are linked. But if there is a question, I've got a suggestion. Let's go to the legislature and make it happen to give them that authority. We've got a great legislative delegation, by the way. There's represented here. Can it pass? The Bay, yes, it can. Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Talamantes. The vote tally for the 2024 election is now 1 yes, no 0. Thank you. Can it pass? The Bay Area is asking itself the same question in seriously considering a multi-billion-dollar housing measure across the entire Bay Area region. The coalition that we can and will put together for a better approach might look different than the coalition before. We should embrace that. To my friends, and you are my friends in the building trades and in the business community, I say to you, join us. The number of construction jobs created by investing $3 billion in housing is going to be incredible economic opportunity for the working men and women of this county. We can build an unprecedented coalition that does not require us to choose between high-wage jobs, safer roads, and climate leadership. We must have it all. Can a new way pass? Some have suggested a city-only measure. So here's what I want to say to that. We should consider that, but only if our county and other city partners are plain uninterested in a new approach. And I am very confident that that will not be the case. And let's not forget that a city-only measure would generate far less money than a countywide measure, and it would eat up the last half cent of the city and county ability to ask the voters for more investment in what is needed and what they want. Can it pass? Whatever the 2023 polling shows, because there'll be a lot of talk about polls, it's way too early. In truth, the case for this kind of measure is being made every single day by the dramatic changes in our daily lives and what we are seeing and living with everywhere. The public can easily see the dire need for affordable housing as they witness the proliferation of tent encampments here and in other high-end, high-cost housing markets on the West Coast. And on climate, nature is our most convincing messenger of all. Do you remember? How can we forget how it was to breathe the air just last year during those terrible wildfires as the haze sat atop our entire region for days on end? A hurricane in California, hundreds dead, and a historic town obliterated in Maui. Rain in August. Bit by bit, our summers are becoming inexorably hotter. It's now called global boiling in many quarters. We haven't seen anything yet, I am afraid. The public knows what is important. This is the start of a conversation that ultimately will lead to a better approach for the voters as early as November of 2024. Let the discussion and the negotiations begin. This proposal in no way is set in stone. I wouldn't presume as one mayor of one city to do that. The percentages may change. We should be open to other funding sources other than a sales tax, including the potential of a county-wide bond. Among the three main categories of funding in a new measure, we should consider some local flexibility, allowing the county in each of its 7 cities to prioritize between housing and transportation. I want to say how much I appreciate all of you being here. And I didn't recognize, but I want to recognize Ann Stausball, who is the chair of the Mayor's Climate Commission, whose leadership, along with our city staff, has driven so much of our city's emerging agenda on climate. Thank you, Ann. And I want to say again how much I appreciate the fact that Mayor Bobby Singh Allen of Elk Grove is here today and will be speaking on our panel. Sacramento County Board of Supervisors the chair of the board, Rich Desmond, would have been here as well, but he had a conflict. And so I know that actually negotiating a measure is not going to be easy, but you better believe it's doable and we can do it together. Though Rich couldn't be here, he put out a statement, and I just think, given, I know the questions that everyone will have, is just the mayor or are others interested in a new approach? I would read to you what he said. I recently met with Mayor Steinberg, Supervisor Desmond said, and other local elected officials to discuss a future Sacramento County transportation measure that would address some of our biggest transportation-related challenges. Roadway repair and maintenance, housing along transit routes, emphasis added by speechmaker, housing along transit routes, and accessible public transit. As chair of the Sacramento Transportation Authority, I applaud Mayor Steinberg for his focus on tackling our transportation laws, yeah, whatever, on that, in a way that promotes cooperation. Although different municipalities may have different needs and priorities for funding within these three categories, I support a construct that highlights the challenges we collectively face in Sacramento County while maintaining flexibility. Not Darrell Steinberg, that's Rich Desmond. Before I bring up our panel, I read that quote because I wanted to emphasize to you that this is not just the city mayor calling for a new direction. We can achieve something together that will answer the real test for future generations. When we had the chance, did we do our part to create more opportunity for working people? When we had our chance, did we do our part to improve our neighborhoods and our roadways? When we had our chance, did we do everything in our power to make sure everyone had a decent place to live? And maybe most important, when we had our chance, did we do everything in our power to save this fragile planet? Thank you very much, everybody. Let me now welcome up the mayor of Elk Grove, Bobby Singh Allen, who I've already introduced. Former city council member Steve Cohn, who is the chair of the Sacramento Smart Coalition around transportation. Kathy Cresswell, who is the chair of the Sacramento Housing Alliance and a great housing champion. Luke Wood, the new president of Sacramento State University. Stingers up. And Gabby Trejo, the executive director of Sacramento Area Congregations Together. And I will say, as Gabby Trejo had a recent experience trying to house people who were in desperate need of housing. You remember the refugees dropped off here in Sacramento just several months ago. All right, I am going to step aside with the microphone. That is my mic. And I've got a chair over here.
Great job.
Thank you. Thank you. So let me begin with Mayor Singh Allen. You know, some would say, City of Sacramento, there they go again, you know, pushing these progressive things. And you're here. And so what do you think about where we are as a county and the construct, this new construct that I've had the honor of putting forward today?
Is it on?
It's on, you're on.
Okay, we're all on. Thank you. Well, thank you. How about a round of applause for Mayor Steinberg? That was wonderful. As the mayor of the city of Elk Grove, the second largest in Sacramento County, it was important for me to be here to not only lend support for this great, bold vision, but I believe in this vision. We had a great opportunity to discuss some of the components, like Supervisor Desmond mentioned, and we were convinced that we needed to do something different. Because like you said earlier, the definition of insanity is to expect different results doing the same thing over and over again. And so while our respective needs might be different city by city, overall, we have the same overarching needs. And this vision, we say something in Visit California, dream big. And so when you dream big, all things are possible. And so it is important for all of us to keep an open mind and understand that we can meet a lot of these goals when we all work together. So thank you for the opportunity to be here and be in support here of what you're trying to accomplish, not only for the city of Sacramento, but the entire Sacramento County and the region as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Mayor. We'll come back. We're gonna come back to you and ask more questions. But Steve Cohn, you have been not just a citywide, but a regional transportation leader for decades, while you served 24 years, I believe. How many? 20. Sorry, I didn't mean
felt like 24.
Didn't mean to age you.
Yeah.
20 years on the Sacramento City Council. And you've seen the region change, the county and the city change. And you've fought for more transportation investments, the right kind, for years. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think your remarks really hit the nail on the head, and I want to applaud. Let's applaud him one more time.
This was, by the way, a requirement for sitting on the panel.
Lots of applause.
I had to agree to give the mayor love. So, but you know, smart growth isn't rocket science, but it is climate science. And I'm glad to see that after all these years, we have been told by people that are pretty smart, in fact, mostly from our community, as well as sometimes our staff, that this R Street corridor is the perfect example. That's why I'm so glad we're here. And Cyrus, I'm so glad to be here with you and to remember Ollie's work and to see this legacy in action. But this is something that can be replicated throughout our region, starting in our county, our city and our county, in Elk Grove, in Folsom, in Citrus Heights, through Rancho Cordova, throughout our city and county and region. And I just think putting housing together with transportation, the way you're talking about, acknowledging the urgency because of the climate. I mean, 9 of the last 10 hottest years have been the last decade in the world. This July was the hottest month ever. And it's looking like this year is going to be the hottest year ever. The urgency's there, and I'm glad that you're seizing the moment.
Thank you, Steve. So, Kathy Cresswell, just as Steve Cohn has been fighting for decades for more smart transportation investments, you've done the same both at the local level and statewide on housing. Put the housing crisis in perspective, especially from maybe the perspective of a housing developer, for-profit or nonprofit, in terms of why it's so hard to build more affordable workforce housing. We could have Lachelle on this panel, or Danielle as well, but we'll have Kathy answer that question.
Well, it's thank you for having us here. It is about how it starts at local government levels and the way that a local government either facilitates or not the development of affordable housing. Where it's not been facilitated, it can add cost to that development. It can limit where that development can go, which then can negatively impact both our climate and our transportation goals. And it's also about, particularly for affordable housing, the need to have deep subsidies to ensure that we can address those most vulnerable in our communities to get them housed. And that is not something that, until recently, that the state was a strong supporter of. Some local governments developed local housing trust funds to get those resources available. But even where they did, if you don't have enough, all state resources for housing are generally competitively awarded. And if you don't have local resources to make that happen, then even when the state makes funding available, our cities or county can't compete and can't get the resources. And so the context is we have needs now that are greater than they've been in the foreseeable past. And we have to take action on it now. The urgency to address our affordable housing needs has never been greater. People, as many know, are dying on the streets, and the public recognizes it, but they're also developing a little bit of empathy, just black off. It's so hard. And so if we don't have solutions now that have a meaningful impact on making a difference and improving lives and changing what people see every day, we're not going to be able to make progress. That's why getting lots of resources targeted to the most vulnerable populations is exactly what we need to do, and need to do it now.
Thank you, Kathy. I want to turn it to Luke Wood, and then I'll get to Gabby Trejo, because we're talking about housing. And Mr. President, first of all, welcome to Sacramento. Yeah,
It's good to be back home.
yeah, good to be back. Good to be back home. When we sat down and talked, it's interesting how quickly the conversation moved to the challenges your students have with housing insecurity. And so as a result of our conversation, I actually changed my outline that you all have here to include student housing. Wasn't included in the first draft. Talk about the research you've done, but also what you're seeing at Sacramento State when it comes to housing insecurity for your students.
Absolutely. In fact, I thought I was going to begin by introducing myself as Josh Wood, the CEO of Region Business, but I don't know if that would play well.
You know what? We love your brother too, and I'm glad he's here.
Yeah.
At a region, I really am. And that's what I said. Join and help lead a new coalition. Love it. Go ahead.
So all jokes aside, first of all, I'm glad to be back home in Sacramento and to Sacramento State, to our alumni, Stingers Up. Essentially, what we know is that many students in colleges and universities across the country struggle with food insecurity, housing insecurity, transportation concerns, and employment barriers. And one of the things I have to say that I thought was very interesting about this proposal is it makes the understanding that there is a connection between different types of concerns. So we know, for example, that across our community colleges, across our Cal States in particular, we have a lot of students who struggle with housing insecurity. And that can be a range of things. Certainly it can be homelessness, but it can be a student who is living in their car, living in a closet, in an untenable living situation, living in a garage. And we also know that those issues don't happen in isolation. A student who experiences housing insecurity is very likely to experience food insecurity of varying levels, transportation concerns, and employment barriers. And really what the research shows is that it's a confluence of those factors that actually is what results in outcome differences. Now, Sacramento State has done an amazing job over the past 8 years under President Nelson's leadership, going from an 8.5% to 28.5% graduation rate. And so I'm very proud to see that, because when I was a student at Sacramento State, that wasn't the case. And so there's been an increase, but when we look at what is the next phase of the work to get our institution to the next level, it has to be more residential living opportunities for students. And when we look at our data, when we have a student who lives in residence with us, the 4-year graduation rate is about 10% higher. And that may not sound a lot, but in the hard work that it takes to increase graduation rates, it's a significant difference in what we see in terms of outcomes. And so we know that if a student doesn't know where they're going to lay their head at night, if they don't know where their next meal is going to come from, then they're not likely to walk across that stage, because it's hard to study, it's hard to be focused, it's hard to be attentive in the classroom when you're worried about real basic concerns like this. And so for us, student housing is going to be and will be one of our primary focuses for the next several years, building out residential living, but doing that requires resources. And so I'm grateful to you for including that within your proposal, and I hope that it's something that can be realized for the benefit of our students and also ultimately for the benefit of Sacramento.
Thank you, Luke, and thank you for being here today. Gabby Trejo, you know, I alluded to the story about the struggle it has been for Sacramento ACT, our leading faith organizers in the community, to find housing for those refugees who were dropped off here from Texas several months ago. An evil act, by the way. But you did a great job. We have thousands of Sacramentans that are having a hard time finding a place to live. Talk about equity, talk about the importance of housing, and if you can, extend the equity conversation even to the roadway portion of what it is I laid out a few minutes ago.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Well, I'll start by saying that at the beginning of this year at ACT, we talked to over 600 residents throughout the city and county, and an overwhelming majority, over 80% of them, talked about them having a really hard time just paying for their rent. Over 30% of their income goes to paying for their rent or mortgage. I encountered one particular individual who was $19 short for his rent, and that's what ended him homeless with his family. That is immoral that anybody in our region would be $19 short and end up on the street just because they didn't know who to call. They were stuck in this calling different entities and nobody ever picked up. And so these kind of stories are so real, and I know other grassroots organizations like us experience and receive those calls throughout. The average rent, one of the questions that we asked since the pandemic, has your rent increased? The average rent in this region for renters has increased by $300. That's a lot for a single parent, for a single income household. And so I think that when I heard you this morning lay out your vision, I feel like it's a good start. And from the place where I get to engage community who are suffering, who are in pain, I can't help to think about the protection of people who are housed now, right? The production of housing long-term, because I know we need it. And as you mentioned, when we received the 36 migrants 3 months ago, right, I picked up a call without really knowing what was going to, await for us. And we're still not fully housed, everybody, they're still maintained themselves and be in hotels. And one thing I must say is that our migrants actually have been a blessing to us at ACT, because it just magnified and exposed the truths and the stories that we've already had been hearing for years. And so I think it is important for us as a region to say, okay, we need to be creative and think outside the box, right? And I think this gets us there. And to start putting some more details around how do we engage grassroots organizations they're not housing experts, they're not climate experts, but that need to be at the table, because we need full ownership of everyone in the community. I think that's the other piece, because if there's something that we're gonna pass, then my mind also goes as an organizer, like, what's the strategy to engage low propensity voters that feel actually very just sometimes hopeless about whether or not the process is going to really help them. And so I think bringing those trusted messengers into a room, and I think this is a great start, it's important for us to cast a collective vision that includes those families that are $19 short from paying their rent and are like, this is a great vision, but I need to pay my rent right now. And so those are just the realities that we have to face every day. But I do think that this is such a great start.
Thank you. You know, I want to note that several of my colleagues, council members Valenzuela and Vang and Maple, have put out a series of important ideas about how to address the housing crisis. And no matter what side of those particular issues you are on, I know one thing for sure, that more resources will help bring everyone together on all these items so that we can make sure that everybody has a decent place to live. And I want to thank you both, all three of you, for putting out some, not being afraid to put out ideas. Because, we all need to do that. And everybody say, ooh, what's the message with the mayor there? The message is, I want us to have a debate and discussion about all that we need to do to make sure that no one is left behind. And more a sustained funding source for housing will make it all go easier and all go better. So let's get to another set of questions. Mayor Singh Allen. So you've been in all of the rooms, right? The negotiating rooms around how these things get put together. How do we approach this conversation to say that while what I laid out, again, is not intended as prescriptive in any way, that it is in fact time to start a different conversation than we've had in the past?
Absolutely. In the last go around, what we did not have is alignment. Alignment not only on transportation, but of course, housing. They are interconnected. We need to be working with all of our agencies together. With Henry Lee, I proudly sit on that board. I also want to do a shout out to Kevin Busey, who's also here as the executive director for STA.
Kevin, stand up.
Thank you also
You're an
for being
important guy.
here. Thank
you, Kevin.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm a proud past chair of STA as well. We need alignment. When agencies and electeds are fighting against each other, it absolutely hurts the community. It hurts the region. It hurts our respective cities and the county. We have to be in alignment. We have so many of the same goals, and so we need to come together as a team and look at the bigger picture. We need to not leave federal funding, federal monies that are on the table. And, with the example of SAC-RT, billions of dollars are on the table, but we need local matching funds. So we need a robust plan to not only address transportation needs, but of course, housing, affordable housing. Building on those transit corridors will absolutely help reach our environmental goals that we all are working towards.
Thank you. I didn't recognize Ann Bailey there, the chair of the CADA board, and you're the chair of this place, so thank you for hosting us and for being here. I'm going to recognize everybody, by the way, before the end of the thing. I'm going to try. Steve Cohn and Kathy Cresswell together. I know that the Transportation Climate Coalition has maybe approached these sets of issues differently than the Housing Coalition. And I know you're not signing off on the dotted line here today in terms of percentages and all that, but you're sitting on the same panel together. What does that say that the housing advocates and the clean transportation advocates are sitting together?
I think it's significant, and while we may not agree on every detail, I think we are in agreement on the vision. And because we work in particular areas, are more familiar with the specific needs. For example, for me, more on the transit and transportation side, although certainly as a city council member for 20 years, I'm very well aware of the housing needs as well. And the Housing Coalition obviously is very expert in understanding the housing needs. So the plain fact of the matter is that no matter even if we put 100% of this measure into either housing or transportation or climate, it would not be enough. We actually, the needs are greater than what this single measure alone can do. But I think what we recognize is that by doing this in the right way with the right mix, we become a magnet now for state and federal funds. We need to learn how to be smart about going after these kinds of funds so that we leverage. And don't forget leveraging private funds as well. So I think that's the genius of what you're proposing in concept, is how to maximize the revenue and do it in a way that finally pays attention to what SACOG's been trying to tell us for years. SACOG is the agency we all have a love-hate relationship with because—
Oh, it's all love for me.
It's all love, yes, all love.
We love James
And there's
Corliss.
Mike McKeever back
Yes.
there too, the former director of SACOG. Mike, thank you.
They're like mom telling you, you know, you got to eat the vegetables. And yeah, we need to eat. But you know what? Vegetables can be really good. And and I think we can grow a nice garden here.
Very good. Kathy? So, go ahead. Same question.
So in our community, we have, for the last, I think it was year, pulled together a group, including SAC-ACT and Sacramento Housing Alliance and others, to start looking at our most urgent need for affordable housing, which was we needed funding and we need to get big funding done. And as we had been we're working on polling and all of those things, then we understood that the transportation folks were also looking to do a measure approximately the same time. So we talked amongst ourselves and said, we do share values with that coalition, and we believe that the people who live in our units and live in affordable housing need access and need mobility to be able to get to their jobs, to their schools, that placing housing in the right locations at the right affordability can both support transportation systems and climate improvements. And, you know, the affordable housing development community have led the way in climate actions for the last few decades. They've been doing energy efficiency and location efficiency. They know how to do housing in a way that benefits the climate, and they do it because it benefits the residents. That's what the mission is about. So we know, as important as affordable housing is, that it has to fit into a system and a structure that will support the residents. And that means having mobility and having those systems in place. So we didn't want to do anything which could harm our partners who are trying to also do good things. So we started those conversations to say, what does make sense? And, you know, we're all looking for 2024. That's the big election time. That's when we have the best chance. We fundamentally think that the most urgent need is for affordable housing. So we're looking to make sure that is the priority. But we also know that we need to work with our partners so that we are really strengthening both the access to safe, affordable, and accessible housing, but in areas that have parks, that have easy mobility. And so we want to figure out how we do that, whether it's an issue of timing, whether we can do one big thing. We don't know that yet, but we are interested in working together to figure out the best way to achieve those objectives.
Thank you. So Luke and Gabby, I want to talk about the relationship between housing and transportation. And imagine at Sac State, the majority of students, I hope I'm right on this, don't have cars, or maybe they do if they commute. But you're right, Sac State, of course, is right along a public transit corridor, light rail corridor. What is the relationship between clean, accessible transportation and student housing? And same question community-wide for you, Gabby, in terms of how the two fit together.
Well, you see at a lot of institutions that have a higher residential living population than we do. You know, we're historically a commuter campus. We have about 2,100 beds in terms of for our residents. At a place like I'm coming from San Diego State, we've got 8,500 or so in residence. And then what you do is then for the first 2 years, you have a requirement for students to essentially live on, and then those students essentially, for the vast majority of them, unless there's a specific need, don't have vehicles. And they don't have vehicles because of the impact that has on the environment. And then we use essentially public transportation and clean options to be able to essentially help address both climate issues and housing issues and transportation issues all at the same time. So a model like that is available across the state. It's just not available here because we've never invested in housing for our students. So I definitely see those as being inextricably connected. But I also think the other thing that we haven't talked about enough here is that these are equity issues. The students who are most likely to struggle with housing insecurity, food insecurity, transportation concerns are oftentimes our most minoritized students who are entrusting the campus to help create a better life for themselves and for their families. And unless we have the resources to be able to do that, we essentially send a false promise to communities that are really in need of this. And so that's why I think that we have to see the interconnection of these issues, but also the direct relationship that they have on equity outcomes, not just in one sector, but across a range of social sectors. You think about what this means short term, but also you have to think about what it means long term. Education impacts employment, education impacts healthcare, education impacts the criminal justice system, right? So there's linkages between all these systems, and an inequity in one system can serve to amplify inequities in other systems. And so I think that's why the interconnection has to be considered.
Thank you. Gabby, transportation and housing together.
Yeah, I whenever I hear the word affordable, my question is always like affordable for who, right? And that's a big question we have to ask ourselves. You know, the most transformational housing that I've ever witnessed in this region has been mutual housing units. And I don't know if anybody other than you're here from mutual housing, but I've worked with residents from there, and the way their lives are transformed and they end the cycle of poverty for their children is something that is unbelievable. And I forget the name of the site, but there's a site in South Sacramento that has charging EV cars. And I remember talking to one of the women there, and she was telling me, I was like, well, she's like, you know, she had 4 kids, she had to drop them off to different places, and she knew that she saved $89 every month in gas because she got to put her name on a list and got to, you know, take her kids. So now that the leader that I was talking to, the woman, she wasn't thinking in terms of the terms that we're using here, right? She's just like, I live here, I have access to this. And so there is when we think about equity, I think about language. What does it mean? We got to stop using climate when we're like, people like me don't use those terms, but they're very much, our people live in the interconnections of all those things. And so I just, whether folks were undocumented or documented or questionable, they felt safe in those places. And it wasn't affordable housing like where I grew up. My version of affordable housing was that I lived with 2 families in a 2-bedroom apartment. And that is what families are finding ways to solve their own solutions and trying to afford their places of, so they can be safe somewhere. And so transportation is super, super important for our families, for low-income families, communities of color, because when we were negotiating and talking to residents around Aggie Square, when we talked to residents in Oak Park, their number one concern for renters was the bus lines, one. For homeowners, their concern was parking, right? And not that one is more important than the other, but they're very real to the people that are there. And that requires, actually, it requires to bring the right people into the room, but it also requires that we slow down to be able to truly listen to people and allow for people who are not used to negotiating, right? To be able to negotiate and understand, well, if I want a bus line, why aren't you doing that? And what I'm asking you. And so I just think of that woman and I have her face, and I didn't know what she was doing when she was signing her name up. But if you want to know success stories, go to Mutual Housing, because I have a list of many families that have been able to thrive.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, just off script for a moment, but I'm so glad that Gabby used this example, because it illustrates the importance of housing, transportation, how they relate. Transportation is usually the second most costly expense especially for working families. Food is certainly up there, but transportation second. And this EV rideshare program that she's talking about, thanks to the Air District, I think SMUD maybe also had some funding into that. But that's an example that could be done much more broadly. And then just quickly on Sac State, that used to be an island. And light rail went right by without a connection. And you may recall, Mayor, the city worked with UP to get that connection so people could come right through. And what followed was housing, all not on campus, but walking distance away from campus the minute we opened that up. And that probably saved Sac State on more parking. You do have a lot of parking, but you didn't have to build as much as you would have because of the housing that was built.
Yeah. So before I ask the last question, we're going to have time for one more question. I just, again, want to thank everybody for coming here today. And I want to thank Ed Emerson and his team. Always do a great job over there for working so hard this week. I want to thank my incredible staff. Really, you've done such a wonderful job, all of you, for putting this together. Mary Lynn, Andrew, Nicole, all of you. And I want to welcome back some of the old team here that have been such a part of my journey. There's Jacob Bytel and Mike McKeever, and there's Julia Burrows and Danny Mangers, of course, everybody, and the city staff that is here. Tom, Jennifer Donlin White, and Jennifer Veneman, everybody worked so hard on climate. I just really am grateful to all of you for the work that you do every day and for being here. And so I want to ask one more question. We talked a lot about housing. We've talked a lot about transit, but I want to imagine a Sacramento in a negative way, actually, because I don't want this to be what it is. A Sacramento that does not fully build out its bikeway plans, that does not have safe streets in every neighborhood, that allows roads to go unrepaired, dilapidated, for years and decades to come. What are we going to do together, is a final question here, to avoid that scenario and create something that will make future generations proud? Bobby, Mayor?
Thank you. For the city of Elk Grove, safer streets is just, it's a quality of life issue, right? And so, you know, not only from fixing our potholes, but those street repairs that are so sorely needed. We were actually fortunate in the city of Elk Grove that in 2022, we passed a local measure that increased our sales tax by 1%. It actually passed by the same percentage that Measure A failed. So our city trusted the leaders to make the decision with them. And so not only was public safety on top of that list, but so was transportation, but safer streets was right there on top of those lists. So safer streets is a quality of life issue. I think it doesn't impact any one city or county individually. It is something that we all need to be working on together and do what's best for our residents. So I know that additional funding would so sorely help our communities. You deal with accidents, street racing, and things like that. That's where we can improve our quality of life with our streets and street repairs. So I know that in our city, this is something that's near and dear to our residents' heart.
Bikeways, street
Yeah.
repairs, pedestrian.
And well, let me add one more nightmare to your scenario. If we have no tree canopy and so we have these.
Oh, by the way, Steve, thank you for reminding, my proposal at the end includes $100 million for the tree canopy. And another 80 or 100 for the American River Parkway. So, you know, you always got to throw in a few extras here for the good of the community. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm right with Bobby in terms of talking about what we could do and think about every city in our county and in our region for that matter, and certainly the unincorporated county has these aging corridors like Stockton Boulevard, like Florin, like Watt, Fulton, Sunrise, Arden, Northgate, Truxell, I could go on and on, Franklin. These corridors could all be so transformed with bus service and with proper landscaping and housing and thriving mixed-use commercial businesses. That's what I'm picturing. And I just put a quick plug in. Smart's having the first in a series of public forums about that very thing, how you transform Stockton Boulevard, the Renaissance on Stockton Boulevard, so it can be like our street is here. And it's going to be September 27th, so mark your calendar in the evening at the Historic Colonial Theater, a real treasure on Stockton Boulevard.
Kathy, what about safe streets and bikeable pathways and pedestrian walkways? What does that mean to the affordable housing movement?
Well, all of those things are important, as I mentioned, and frequently the affordable housing development community incorporates bike lockers, tries to support bike paths, frequently is working on some transportation improvements. So, or it's a part of the system. So again, I think we recognize that we have to have all of those things connected for the benefit of the people who live in those, that are going to live in affordable housing. But we also need to, as Gabby has said and others have said, we need to talk to the community to find out what are their most urgent needs. We may think it's, more trees or something, but it may be something very simple in terms of where do they put their bikes if they do have bikes. So I think we can't have the kind of communities that are equitable, that are affordable, if we aren't looking at how all of the pieces that make for a good community, good neighborhoods, what all the things they need, and make sure that we're providing the support for them. So we think those things are important. We fundamentally, though, think, affordable housing is a key to getting those things and working with, when you're building new, that you're providing the resources to help them provide those things. But then also in our existing neighborhoods, we have to figure out ways to bring those resources. Housing policies in this country were a significant driver in the inequities and segregation that we see in our communities now. So it has to be a part of the solution that improves the lives of people in communities now. And it can be done by both building new with all of the amenities and things that create good places, but also in not forgetting the neighborhoods and the communities that too often have been forgotten.
Thank you. Before I ask Luke and Gabby to bring it home here, you get the final words here about what you see here today and what's possible for our community. Again, thank you to all my colleagues once more. all of you for being here. Really means a lot. Eric, thanks for helping to get that meeting together last week that helped bring us together. Thank you to Dan Weitzman and Amber Wanell for your hard work over these 3 weeks, this long week especially. Gabby and Luke, what do you see for the future of this community?
I see a lot of hope I work with the fifth community, so I feel like I was born with a lot of hope, and I think that the resilience that people, even as they're struggling, like they have the solutions to the stuff they're struggling with. It's really not that complicated, right? I think what we're trying to figure out today is like, okay, how do we bring the money in? And then I actually thought about like your scenario. And then as an organizer, I feel like I'm already constantly, when our organizers are reaching to our elected officials, we're constantly telling you that the house is on fire and we need to act now. And but I think today it fills my heart with joy to know that that while we still have to figure out the details of what it all looks like, that if whatever comes in the future is centered around people, then we would know that we have done the right thing. If it's centered around anything other than the people that are the most vulnerable in our community, then we will know based on the questions that we are asking as a collective. And so my hope, I walk away with a lot of hope, and my ask of everyone here and other folks that are not in the room is to have the courage to have a bold vision, because our families deserve it. No one should be on the streets because they were $19 short, just because we couldn't figure out how to negotiate together.
Luke, and then the final word is actually going to go to our mayor, Bobby Singel.
I like how you said our mayor.
Yes.
So I would agree with hope, and I think that's definitely part of it. I think from the perspective of a university, and provided the dim view that could be of the future, we have 3 roles in this: educate, innovate, and provide. So we have to educate our community, and that's our student community. So these are the individuals who are the next leaders within this region. The moniker for the campus for many years was "Leadership Begins Here." And if you look across our entire region, some of the most influential leaders in business and education and healthcare are individuals who graduated from our institution. So it's making sure that they're aware of what a bright future can and should look like, and also about their personal responsibility and vested interest in making sure that happens. Innovate. We have to be innovative in the work that we do and have partnerships that allow us to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And so, for example, we're working on the California Mobility Center with GSEC and with SMUD in terms of thinking about electric vehicles and how we can try to create clean and effective transportation for the future. And so that's part of our commitment to using our standpoint as an institution to generate economic development for the local region through our research enterprise. And then third, we have to provide. We have to be able to provide housing for our students. And it's not just housing for the sake of people going to be able to live someplace. That's one part of it. The part that I think most people don't understand is that housing for students is only effective when there's additional resources that are there that actually lead to their success. So we can have many apartment complexes around our campus, but that doesn't actually translate to student success. It's about when they go back to that place of, where they're living, do they have academic advising? Do they have tutoring? Do they have supplement instruction? Do they have caseworkers who are working with them to address mental health concerns and other wraparound services that help lead to greater levels of success? And for us, that's the next phase of our journey in trying to be part of the solution for the future. So we have to educate, we have to innovate, we have to provide, and of course, we have to partner with great leaders like our city mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Singh-Allen, last word. Where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? First of all, thank you, Dr. Wood. I'm proudly made at Sac State, and I'm so proud to see you leading the way with all of the great work that you're doing. So can we give him a round of applause? Yeah. Fingers up. The former mayor and my mentor to this day was the late Joe Cerna Jr. And I feel him in this room today. I feel him in this room today because he was all about innovation. And what I love and appreciate about this project, this proposal, is the innovation. Where do we go from here? This is where it takes all of us to get to a win. It is absolutely possible. And so let us not be positional in our mindset. Let us be collaborative. Let us be interest-based. We all share the same goals. And so let us all come together, not only as a region, but the business community, our labor community, and in a bipartisan way. This is a win for our residents in the greater region. So it takes all of us. Are we going to do this all together?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I hope that Ali and Pat Sablehouse would be proud and happy today. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming.